Hi everyone, in this video I wanted to share with you how to do the back stitch when you are cross stitching. This stitch is usually represented as solid lines on a cross stitch pattern. For this example I'm going to be using 2 strands, but sometimes the pattern will specify how many strands to use. Come up with your needle and thread through the back of the fabric. Then I will take my needle and thread and place it down through the hole directly below where I came up. Pull the working thread through. Next you'll come up in the hole above the stitch you just made. Pull the working thread through, and then you'll take your needle and thread and make a stitch in the same hole that the top of the first stitch is. You'll continue making these stitches, basically moving 1 stitch length ahead and then making the stitch backwards. You can of course make stitches right, left, diagonal to change the direction of the back stitches. As you can see, I'm making each stitch across 1 thread at a time, but you can also make them across multiple threads at a time. You may want to avoid making them too long, but generally I feel like on 14 count Aida you can get away with 2 or 3 threads at a time and it looks fine. If you prefer to stitch in hand, you can also make the stitch using the sewing method instead of the stabbing method, which was the method I was showing. To do this, you would just come up with your working thread and then take your needle below the working thread, then come out to the surface of the fabric with your needle in the hole above the working thread. And if you're skipping around and you're not working across a straight line, then you would just come out wherever the end of the next stitch is that you want to make. I personally prefer to use an embroidery hoop when I cross stitch, but this is way faster this way and it feels really nice to just do the stitch all in one motion. Sometimes the back stitch is really simple and you can follow the grid line of the fabric, but then there's other times where there might be some stitches that end in the center of a square, and they might also kind of cross over squares a little bit strangely to where you can't make a back stitch across each one. So I wanted to share with you this really simple example. I went ahead and just stitched the flowers in a little flower pot, and I'm going to be embroidering these stems. So I would start by locating the bottom here on my fabric and start from there. And if you look at the stem here, you can make a single back stitch that spans all the way from here to here if you wanted to, but I think that I might do 1 back stitch across 2 squares and then do 1 other back stitch that ends in the middle of the 1, 2, 3, in the middle of the 4th square. This also starts in the center of these squares, so as you can see here, it's not across an intersection where the holes would be. So I will be starting this directly at the base and in between, like kind of in the block for the back stitch in the very center. So technically you could just stitch all the way up if you wanted to where it needs to end, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do a short one because I think it'll lay nicer on the fabric. So I'm gonna go in the center of this 2nd square here. Or actually I'll do it on the edge, kind of in between the top of the 2nd square. Right here. It ends on the 4th square in the center. So on the fabric we got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need to go up through the center of the 4th square, like this. And then I'll just go back down where the end of that stitch is. So like I said, you could have just made 1 long stitch. I don't like to make my stitches that long, so I went ahead and shortened it. So next we'll go ahead and go to these right here. And for these, I think that they're short enough to just make 1 back stitch. So the back stitch will end in between these 2 blue stitches, and then it will end in the middle of that last stitch I just made. I'm going to start right here and just make a stitch right here that ends at the top of that last stitch. And then I'll do that again on the other side. So now I'm gonna go ahead and plan out how I wanna do this. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a little bit longer than this one, but I think I can manage to do it in just 2 stitches. So I guess I'll just start from here and then end at the top of the square. So I'll basically span 2.5 squares, and then the other stitch will be across 2 squares. So I'll start by going up through the fabric, and we'll end right 1, 2, right here at the end of that. Right here. And then I'm just going to end it in the same hole that the little V forms. Like that. And then I'll go ahead and go back up again at the very base of that cross stitch. And go back down at the top of that stitch, like that. The ones along the side here are actually relatively straightforward. I think I'm just going to do one back stitch that spans 2 stitches and then one that spans 1. So starting 2 ahead here, right here, I'm gonna go up through the fabric, and then I'm gonna come back down where the top of that last stitch is. And then I'm going to come up at the corner right here in between those 2 stitches. And then I'm gonna come back down at the bottom left corner, just like that. So I'll do that again on the other side. So 2 over, we'll start there, and I'm going to end right here, and then in the corner, and at the bottom right, like that. And then finally we have these 2 stitches at the top here. Again, I think that they will be best to work just all the way as 1 stitch to the next flower, because as you can see, the stitches don't really end in the corner of this square right here. So that's why I think this is supposed to span all the way to the middle. It would look a little bent if you did it that way. So I'm going to start in between these stitches here, and then I'll make a stitch, or you can start at the top in the middle, either way. And then I'm going to go right down in the middle of this square right here, right at the base of that little cross stitch. And then again, I'll show you from this side too, in case you want to do it the other way, but either way works. Come up through the middle at the very base of the flower, and then come back down at the corner in between those little petals. And that is how you would do a backstitch that has a little bit of a different pattern when it comes to where the stitches are lying. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you want to see more embroidery tutorials, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.